Hi and welcome to this video. Over the years, I've done multiple Hetzner tutorials ranging from server setup, cloud setup, dedicated server setup. Today, I just want to do a tutorial for cloud because I saw that certain things have changed since the last time I did a video like that. So what is Hetzner? Hetzner is a cloud provider. If you want to host a website, serve anything, even if you want to run like Chrome online 24 hours, you can get a server from Hetzner and do that. So that's what Hetzner does. Servers and storage. You need storage, they also offer storage. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy a server, and then we're going to see how to manage the server on Hetzner. Things you can do, you can stop it, you can increase the size of the server and so on. So if you're new to Hetzner, this is a video for you. So first, of course, create an account. If you want to create your account, just come here under login. And even before we get there, if you want 20 euros for Hetzner Cloud, you can get that in the link below. I will add the link below. So first of all, let's just go and create an account. I'm not going to create an account, but let me show you where you can create one. So login, and so console used to be cloud, but now it's called console. So this is where you'll find the cloud related things like cloud servers, load balancers, firewalls for the cloud, and so on. So all that can be found under console. Robot, this is where you'll find dedicated servers, and I'll show you how you can change to any of this when you're within your account, when you're logged into your account. So say you want to go to console, you'll click there on console, which is the Hetzner Cloud. So I'm already logged in, but let me go somewhere else where I'm not logged in. So say I open this in a private window, open in a private window. You can see here, I can log in, but if you don't have an account, here is register now. And you can create your account. So if your account is new and you're not from Europe or the US, you might find it hard to create your account, but just keep trying. And I would suggest you try paying with PayPal if your credit card or debit card is declined. All right, so that's the account creation. I'm going to assume you've tried, you've created your account, and you've successfully logged in. So let's see what you can do on the cloud console, or rather on the cloud, on the Hetzner dashboard. So here on the dashboard, if you come back, so this will be the home page for your cloud related things, and as I've said, they've changed cloud to console, so you can switch to the different Hetzner products. For example, if you come here, you can go to Robot. This is where you can buy dedicated servers, and I do have a very reliable tutorial for setting up Hetzner dedicated servers. You can manage servers here. You can come buy your servers from there. Let's do something that I know most people want to do, and that is, how can I deploy a server? Probably that's your question. How can I deploy a cloud server, a VPS server on Hetzner and log into that server? So let's see how to do that. So I'm going to come here, go back to console. And on console, you can create projects. So here you can create a project, and this project will be used to host everything, to categorize everything. If you have servers, load balancers, anything, they'll all be categorized under the project. So I'll create a project called sample, and then add the project, click on the project, and inside the project, you're going to see an overview of everything you have. So if I had servers, IPs, and so on, they'd be listed here. First step, let's create a server. So I'll just click there on server, or you can come here on this button, click on create resource, and you can create any of these resources. In this case, let's create a cloud server, Hetzner Cloud server. Choose a location. I'll choose, let's go with Falkenstein for this example. And then the image, I'll go with Debian. You can choose any image you want, just select the version there. Perhaps you're a Fedora user, you can choose your Fedora there, your Fedora distro version there, and so on. These are the operating systems that you can select, but sometimes you want to select maybe one of the provided apps. So let's look at the apps that they provide. So perhaps you want to install Docker on your cloud server. You can have Docker automatically installed for you, and it's going to show you what version you get with which operating system. In this case, you can see the Docker will be installed on Ubuntu 24.4. So any of these other ready to go applications, maybe you want a WireGuard VPN, you can click there and WireGuard will be installed, and you can just log into your server and set everything up. But usually you'll just deploy an operating system. In my case, I'll go with Debian, and we're going to see how to log into Debian. And then the type of the servers, you can get a shared virtual CPU. This is a CPU, this is a VPS, and there's also a dedicated virtual CPU. This is also a VPS, but the processor is not shared. So in this case, if you get two virtual CPUs, so for a shared CPU, for example, you're given two virtual CPUs, somebody else has 4 virtual CPUs. So they might, right? It's not guaranteed, but they might eat into some of your CPU and lower the performance of your server. But for Hetzner, I don't think they do over provisioning, because all the times I've used their servers, I've never had a situation where performance is noticeably degraded due to shared CPU. So you can just go with that, stick with that until you get to a point where you see that maybe you need guaranteed CPU. You need a guaranteed CPU number. That's that. For the shared CPU, you can look at the ones you have down there. So usually you'll find that some of this, if you try to create it in a region, you'll see that it's not available, and that's because it's out of stock, but eventually it might show up. Just keep trying and you will get it eventually, because they usually add new stock for these cloud servers, but sometimes they do run out. So just bear that in mind. If maybe you try to create that, you might find that it's not available. So just try another one and see if that's available instead. And if none of these are available, the x86 CPUs, you can go with the ARM processors. So the ARM processors are also ready to use, production ready. You can use them for whatever you want to use them for, provided that what you need to run on the ARM processor is supported. For example, certain applications don't support ARM processors. So make sure you look into that before you deploy your server on ARM64. So I'm going to stick with ARM64 because they're usually more available than the others. And I'm going to go with this 4 CPUs and 8 GB of RAM. And you can see this is pretty much affordable considering what you're getting. Networking, you can get an IPv4, a public IPv4. If you're going to host a website, of course, you need an IPv4 or a public IPv6. So I'm just going to select both. This is free and this is charged at that per hour. I think it comes to 0.5 per month. So bear that in mind. This is going to get included into your server final pricing. And then private networks. Say you want to run a database cluster on Hetzner. One way to do that would be to put the database in a private network, and then you just connect your workloads to that database using the private IPs that you get using the private network. If you understand what that means, then you understand it. If you don't, you probably don't need it. Okay. Another situation where you might need the private network is perhaps you want to run your own Kubernetes cluster. In that case, you can install Kubernetes cluster in your private network and have it talk to each other within the private network. It will talk to each other within the private network as long as the other virtual machines have also been attached to that same network. So let's say, for example, we just create a sample network here. Let's call it network 1. And then the IP range, I'm assuming you don't know what this means, so you'll just leave it there at default and you can create the network. So once this is created, it's going to get attached to that private network. Now this is something you don't need, okay? I'm just adding it here as an example, but you don't need it. If you're going to run WordPress, you're going to run your Laravel application, you don't need the private network. It's just something that is there. You can create it and use it. And then SSH keys, this is an important one. This is what I actually recommend that you use for logging in. So let's see how to create an SSH key and add it here. So I'm going to go to my terminal. So if you're on Windows, don't sweat it. You can go to Google and search for Git. And then from this website, install Git for Windows. Once you download and install Git, open Git Bash. Open Git Bash and use Git Bash to follow along. With Git Bash, you're able to do all the commands I'm about to do. I'm just going to make a directory here, and I want to do it here. Sample 1, and I will go into that directory. I don't really need to go into the directory. I will generate my SSH key, SSH key gen, and I want a key of type ed25519, and I want the key to be stored in the directory I've just created, sample. So usually you'll have all your SSH keys stored here. Okay, I don't want to confuse you. You'll usually have them stored inside here, and you can create a directory in there and store them in whichever location you want. In my case, I'm just doing this as an example, and I'm going to have it stored in sample, and I will call the key my test key. And you can also add a comment, and the comment could be something like for WP on Hetzner. Hetzner, and then enter, and it's going to ask you for a passphrase. So I'm going to add a passphrase just to show you what it does. So the passphrase is what enables you to secure the key. So every time you want to use this key to log in, you have to enter the passphrase. It is a passphrase for the key. So I'm just going to enter a sample password here, confirm the password, and then enter. Now the key has been generated. Now I can use this key and I can add the public key to my Hetzner. So I'm just going to Control-Shift-C to copy, Control-Shift-C to copy. If you're on Git Bash, you can use Shift-Insert to copy. So I'm going to look at the directory of that file. If you're on Windows and you don't have cat, I don't know that it's available in that, but you can open it with Visual Studio Code. Just do that and it will open it on Visual Studio Code. I want to look at the files, content of this, and I can copy the entire thing of the public key, and then I will add it to Hetzner. So add server key, Control V, and automatically it picks up the name of the comment as its name. And you can also set it as a default key for every server you create. I'm going to add SSH key, and now it's added. So if you need to log into this server, we are going to need to use the SSH key. And then volumes, you can add volumes. Volumes are additional storage that you can attach to your server. Just think of this as an external hard drive that you can add to your server and use, and Hetzner is in charge of managing it and making sure that redundancy is maintained. That's something you can add. I'm not going to add it. And then firewall as well. You can add a firewall. I'm going to show you how to work with firewalls later on. And then backups. Of course, if this server is going to be used for production, maybe you're running your WordPress website on this Hetzner server, make sure you enable backups, because I can assure you one day your server will get compromised, and when it does, the only thing that will help you will be your backups. So this is important. Make sure you enable backups. It's 20% of the server, 20% of the price of the server per month. Placement groups, you can add placement groups and group items together. You can add labels to your items, so you can add a label to this server. Okay, so you can use labels to attach your virtual machines, maybe to a load balancer, to a firewall. Cloud config, if you want to run any cloud init commands, you can run cloud init in there. Maybe you want to install things using cloud init. When the server comes up and you know how to use cloud init, you can automatically set up everything as the server is being installed. And then the name of the server, if you're going to use this server for something that involves mail, you're going to install a control panel, and the control panel requires a host name, make sure the host name is something that is a fully qualified domain name. So an example would be something like server.bizanosa.com. All right, so this is a fully qualified domain name, because if I was to add an A record to this would be accessible. That is what essentially a fully qualified domain name means. All right, so assuming that's all we want for our server, we're just going to create the server. But if you want more, you can always create multiple servers. Maybe you want to set up a cluster of databases, Kubernetes cluster. You can always create the number of servers that you need, right? Maybe you need 3, you can set up 3. All right, so I only need 1. I will delete the others. And just with that, I can create and buy now. Hopefully the server is available. Yeah, there we go. The server is available. It's been created there. So just give it a few moments for it to be created, and then we're going to see how to log in. Less than a minute ago, it has been created. If you see the green, it means it's running. You can click on it to view details about the server. So this is where you can manage the server. Maybe you want to resize it, you want to add a volume, add a firewall. You're going to see how to do that here. Let's just copy the IP. We want to log into our server. So remember, when I was deploying the server, I did not use a password. I simply created an SSH key. I added my public SSH key. Make sure the key you add is the one with .pub, and that's going to make sure that when you're logging in, you only need to log in with that key. So in this case, I can log in SSH. The user by default will be root. Ctrl+Shift+V to paste. On Windows, if you're using Git Bash, Shift Insert to paste. And then we're going to log in using the private key that we've just created. So I'm going to copy this, Ctrl+Shift+V to paste it, and I will enter. So the first thing is the fingerprint OK. Type yes to confirm. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm the one who's messed up. It's not supposed to bring me a password, and that's on me. Okay, so I'm just going to press Ctrl+C, and sometimes I usually forget this myself. Okay, I need to add -i. -i is simply telling it that the identity of the key is that. All right, and now it's asking me for the passphrase for my key. I'll use the same passphrase there. Make sure it's something that is simple enough that you can remember. It doesn't have to be too complicated, but it doesn't have to be too easy either. So there we go. We are logged into our server. We can check details about the server. Host name CTL. That's going to show us some details about our server. We are running Debian 12. We can also check what details we will get about our CPU. Remember, I chose the 4 virtual CPU Ampere server. So let's look at that. LS CPU. You can see it is a 64-bit system. We have 4 CPUs, and it is an ARM processor server. And that's pretty much it for that, right? If you want to update, you can do sudo apt update. Ctrl+L. Let's check if we have a firewall UFW status. Personally, nowadays I don't like to use UFW because I prefer to use NF tables. If you're going to add a firewall to your application, I would suggest nowadays just stick with NF tables, and you can find some NF table samples from the NF tables wiki. So for that, I don't want to go into that, but that's something I can do later. But for now, since you're just a beginner, maybe you don't know what to do, it's okay to use UFW. So you can install UFW apt, install UFW. Maybe you want to install htop as well. I want to install Vim. Enter. Once I install UFW, maybe I can enable it. UFW status. It is not running, so you can add UFW allow SSH to allow the SSH. UFW allow SSH. This will allow the SSH port. Maybe you want to run applications. You can also allow HTTP to allow port 80. You can also allow HTTPS to allow that. And now if I do UFW status is still offline, inactive, we can enable it. UFW enable. Type Y to confirm, enter. There you go, firewall is active. Now if I was to do UFW status, that's what's happening. Now let me look at my IP. Let me get my IP. That there is my IP, inet. And for the private network that I created, this is it. So if you wanted to work with your private network, you can use that. You can use this IP range, right? You can see for this one, the IP is 2. I will paste and go to my IP. You can see nothing is there, but maybe let's try and install Nginx. apt install Nginx. So if we install Nginx and we reload, all right, now we have Nginx on the server. So that's just basics of logging into the server. So up to this point, we've created our Hetzner server. We've logged into that server and we've seen how we can update the server, install new applications. To update the server, you can just do apt update. That will update the cache, and you can do apt upgrade to upgrade the packages. Enter. There we go. The server is now up to date. So up to this point, you've seen how to deploy the server, update, install a few things, maybe enable UFW firewall on the server. So let's see how we can manage our virtual machine, our cloud server on Hetzner. So this is a cloud server we created. The first thing that I know most people may want to know how to do is, how can I rescale the server? You just realize that the application you're running is using a lot of resources. So you come to HTOP, you look at HTOP, you see your server is always at 80 CPUs. All CPUs are always at 80%. That is reason enough for you to upgrade. And you want to upgrade, you can come here under Rescale to rescale the server. So click on Rescale, and here under rescaling, there are two types of rescale. You can rescale with CPU and RAM only, or you can rescale the entire server. This will rescale only the CPU and RAM if this is checked. But if you uncheck that, it means that you're going to rescale the size of the server as well. So the one that is marked, that is my current server, and it has 80 GB of storage. So if I was to click there on CPU and RAM only, the storage is stuck at 80, right? So if you're sure that you want to rescale your entire server and take advantage of the extra storage as well, make sure you uncheck that. Okay, so you can now scale even the disk. Something to keep in mind is that the moment you do this, you uncheck CPU and RAM only, it means that you cannot scale back to where you are. If you're just doing a test and you want to scale back, then make sure you check that, because you can see this is 160 GB. It cannot scale back to 80 GB. So if you're sure that you just want to check the CPU and RAM and see if there are any performance improvements, check that and scale. And if you see that there is no noticeable improvement in performance, you can just go back to where you are initially. So I'm not going to do this because it might take just a bit of time. I don't want the video to be too long, but if you want to scale, all right, you can see the button is grayed out, is disabled. First thing you have to do is to stop the server. Just click up there to stop the server. So the server is stopped. You can select where you want to scale to, and you'll be able to rescale the server. Just click there on Rescale, give it a few minutes to do what it will do, and your server will now be using the new 8 CPU and 16 GB of RAM. So I'm going to turn it on. So that is rescaling, rebuilding the server. You can also rebuild the server. So you just realize that maybe you want to run a certain version of MariaDB, and the version you have on your server is not the version you want. So you decide that, you know what, let me just start from scratch. I will change from Debian to Ubuntu. So you'll just come in here, click on rebuild, and then you can select the new server that you want to install. Say, search for Ubuntu. Maybe you want Ubuntu 24.04. You can click there to rebuild. I think this is going to send you the password. Let's just see what this is going to do. So first of all, paste the name of the resource. All previous data on the disk will be lost. This means that it's like starting afresh. So rebuild. And this is important. Let me show you this, because if you're new, you might get stuck somewhere, leading to Googling a few things. So let's see that. I want to check if it's going to send me an email with my password for the new server. So right now the server has been rebuilt. Come back here. It's not even responding because it's logged out. That's probably not going to work. So if I try to connect to the server again, you see it brings the remote host identification has changed, because the remote host has actually changed because a new server was installed. You can do SSH keygen dash remove and copy the IP, Control-Shift-V, enter, and that's going to delete it. So if I try to log in now, it's going to ask me to accept the new key. Yes. Apparently this is nice. It automatically used my SSH key to set up the server. That's something I wanted to confirm. Alright, so that's good. At least it will use the SSH key to set up the server. That's good. And then you can do whatever you need to do, update the server, install what you need to install, enable UFW if you're going to use UFW on Ubuntu, and we can check that the version of server we have now, host name CTL, enter. So now we have Ubuntu 24.4, Linux 6.8. Alright, that is done. We've seen how to rescale, rebuild. Let's see something else before I end the tutorial. Firewalls, right? The recommendation is this for security. First, enable the firewall for your cloud provider, and also enable the firewall within your operating system. So if you're using Ubuntu, make sure you enable your firewall. So once you set up your firewall on your server, you can also set up a firewall on the cloud level. So let's create a firewall here. You can allow whichever ports you want to allow. Of course, first of all, you want to allow SSH port. If you change it, make sure you come there and edit your new SSH port. You can add a rule, leave it at TCP, and select the port we want. Maybe you want to allow port 80 for HTTP. The next one, let's allow HTTPS. That is 443. Maybe you want to allow a specific port that you use for something else. You can also add a custom port. Make sure you select the correct protocol from there. In this case, we've just stuck with TCP. It needs to be attached. It needs to be attached to something. So this is where you can select what you want to attach to it, and you can see it has automatically selected a server, and that's the server we have there. So which field have I forgotten? Let's see. There's a field I've forgotten. Okay, that's this one here. Maybe we want 53. So here under selection, if you want to select a different server or a different load balancer to apply this firewall, just click there on select resources, and you can apply it to a server or apply it to a label. Okay, so if you have multiple servers with a particular label, you can just select the label, enter the label, and use that to attach this firewall to those instances. You can also give this firewall a label. If you need to use it somewhere else, attach it to something else, you can simply use its label. Alright, so that's how to create a firewall. We're just going to create the firewall. Now it's applied to this resource. So for starting and stopping your server, let's click here on power. You can always reboot your server through here. You can always reboot your server From here, you can do sudo reboot. That's going to reboot your server. If you safely want to shut down and restart the server, just click there on shutdown. Okay, shutdown will send an SCPI signal, which is safer. So if you click there on shutdown, it will shut down the server, and once it's shut down, you're going to see power on, and you can turn it back on. So let it shut down, and then you're going to turn it on again, right? So now you can see it's off, you can turn it on. What else do we have here? Volumes. Say you want to add a volume, you realize that you need an extra disk or an extra storage where you can send your backups for whatever you're running. You can add a volume for that. So create a volume, and these are powered by SSD and they have redundancy, right? So that means that there is some level of security for your data. So I'm going to create a volume, and let's say I want to create a volume of 50 GB. And just type there 50, create 50 GB. That will be $2.20 a month. You can give it a name and leave it there. Now, the beautiful thing is that you don't even have to go to your server to set this up. You can automatically have it set up for you. So if you click the automatic, it will automatically get attached to your server. So before I even do anything, if I do df-h, it's going to show me all the disks that I have. Okay, you can see all the disks that I have. The largest available storage I have is 70 GB. So let's come back and deploy this. So I will make it automatic. Choose a file system. By default, it's going to use ext4, but you can go with XFS. In this case, I'm going to click XFS, and then I'm going to create and buy now, but stick with ext4 for your case. So just let it finish creating, and then the moment is created, we can come back to our server, and if we check, we should see our new disk is there, has been mounted for us. So you can only attach one volume to one virtual machine. It is not like an NFS situation where you can attach one disk to multiple virtual machines. It's not possible. One-to-one situation. Okay, something else that's also might be important to you is snapshots. So maybe you're about to make a major change. You can take a snapshot of your server. If anything goes wrong, you can start a new server somewhere with the same snapshot of your server instance. Your backups are here. Remember, we enabled backups. So your backups will run at a regular time every day to make sure that your server is backed up. Something else, graphs. So if you want to look at graphs, graphs are your server metrics. So if for some reason you see that your website is slow and sluggish, and it usually doesn't happen, so just come here and look at the metrics to see if there is any spike in CPU usage or disk or whatever. Then you can go to your server and investigate. Sometimes if it is not responding, you can just restart the server and then log into your server and investigate. This should pretty much cover this tutorial. If you need to do anything else, just click there and look at what options you have. So I'm going to delete the server. Click on delete and then delete server. So it says volumes are attached to this server. Any volumes will be automatically detached before the server is deleted, which might lead to data loss. So I'm just going to delete the server. I don't care for any of the data on this server. And at the same time, your IPs can be deleted along with the server, or you can keep them unassigned. And if they're unassigned, you'll be charged at, I think, 50 cents a month. 50 cents a month. So I'm going to delete the server and delete the IP as well. This should be a pretty comprehensive introduction to Hetzner for anyone who is new to Hetzner. If anything is still challenging to you, just let me know and I'll see how to assist you. If you need help setting up your server, you can go to bizanosa.com. We can help you set up your server at very reasonable prices. So that's it for this one. Until next time.